Hello and welcome to the Gauntlet Podcast. My name is Lowell, pronouns he, him. With me today are a number of people here for our 200th episode. That includes Jammi, one of the hosts.
Hello.
And Rich, our editor and sometimes host and longtime Gauntleteer.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Lowell.
And Sherri, our other host.
So excited. Hi.
So as I said, this is the 200th episode of the Gauntlet Podcast, which was started by Jason and Dan many years ago. Now, we've tried some alternate formats over the years. Interviews, we did a full year of that, and GM masterclasses. But we've always returned back to the key element of play. Our episodes focus on RPGs getting games to the table. And then our current format emphasizes that with the bulk of each of the episodes being two hosts and then a guest, each talking about one game they recently played on the Gauntlet. We break down what we liked, what we're less sure about, and our overall thoughts. So we've always been extraordinarily focused on play. It's what I dig about what we do. It's what I like talking about and what people have generally dug. So for this 200th episode, we really wanted to lean into that. What makes good play at the table? And this is going to come from our perspective as players and as game facilitators. And that's going to bring us to the fifth person we have here at the table.
Dun, 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 dun.
And that is Greg Gelder, a designer and a Gauntlet veteran, who is right now working on his own podcast about good play. Greg, thank you for coming.
Hey, everyone.
Greg has this in process. When we first talked about this, I was like, ooh, let's get Greg on, and maybe this will push him to get his podcast in process. This is how we soft push people, okay?
Yeah, it's all loving pushes.
Lovingly being pushed into the flight. I'm super excited about it. Unfortunately, I got the idea in my head. I'm super excited about it, and then work came and went, no, not this month at all. So, working on it. Yeah, it'll be out there soon.
Excellent. And we'll certainly put that in the Twitter feed in every which way we can when that comes out.
So for this very special episode, what we're going to do is we each have a few topics that we'd love to talk about in terms of what brings about or invites good play at the table. And we're all going to jump in, ask a few questions of each other, see where the conversation leads us. And I'm really excited to get into it.
I'm going to start the things that are most important to me. And the one thing that it is being really smart about your interruptions and intrusions. You know, a lot of what we do in collaborative play is helping each other out and suggesting things. But when you want to do that, when you want to suggest something for another player's scene, take a breath and give them a chance to respond first. Let them have the space to think about it. Once they've kind of got an answer, maybe come in. Let them have that opportunity. If you still think your suggestion is better, maybe take another breath and double check. If the player and the game facilitator seem stoked for the response, maybe just pocket that. Put your suggestion to the side, maybe work it into something else. So you want to be aware of what's happening. You want to be aware of that dynamic at the table. It's not that you can't collaborate, you can't interrupt, but you want to do that judiciously. I try not to do that more than once per player per game. Like, I kind of hard code. If I've already jumped in and given somebody a suggestion, I don't want to keep being the person who comes in and does that. This is going to depend on the table, but I really think it contributes to the feel of sharing if you are generous about that.
This is an important suggestion because there are some people who will agree with the suggestion even if they don't like it. Like, they're sort of hard-coded to like be people pleasers, or they have a hard time of pushing back. They may just go ahead and say yes to something. And so, Lowell, I think it's a great suggestion by saying that you're going to limit it to just once per game per person. I think that's a good way of going about it. An easy rule to remember.
I come from a little bit of an improv background, and there's sort of this mentality I get into as a player And it's that if I have a good idea, I'll have another good idea again.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had a good idea for that scene, if I had a good idea for this moment and it didn't happen, I don't get attached to it. If you get attached to your ideas as a player, especially when it's another character, they're framing a scene or they're building something up, and you jump in there and you're like, oh, well, with this way, it's going to mess with a little bit of that rhythm. So if you have a good idea, you'll have another good one in 5 minutes when it's your character's turn. And there's a suggestion. It's not that your idea was bad or anything. Don't get attached to it, because then the next one is going to come along and it'll be the right thing for them, right?
Yeah, we are made of like dozens of good ideas per game, right? So I like that very much, this idea of abundance.
Yeah.
Another thing I'll say, kind of an add-in on that, is watch how your fellow players, what their mode or their pattern is. If a player stops and takes time to answer, learn that they're going to do that, and don't assume that that's dead space or dead air. I think that's something, is to kind of get a sense of the rhythm of the table maybe before you start jumping in. I have some great players that I love, and I had to get used to the fact that they take that long pause, because so many players are like, right, got to jump in. But I've got some great, creative, interesting players that I love playing with and I love running for, that take a longer pause than maybe I'm entirely comfortable with, but they come up with great stuff.
Yep. As a fast-talking silence filler, I have to really hold myself back on those moments.
One thing I will say about the only one time per session rule is I feel like if any player says, oh, I'm stuck, or verbalizes that they would like to source the table, that rule, chuck it out the window. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah, right. I've set our initiative order.
Oh, that's right.
We have a marching order.
I'm
Into the...
flashbacking. Initiative order.
It's sort of reassuring.
Isn't it? So, Jammi, what's your first topic that you want to discuss?
The first topic I wanted to look into is communicating clearly and out of character. This is something I've seen come up often, and it's something that I've seen the Gauntlet do a lot. So TTRPGs thrive on open collaboration. And there's a lot for a player and a GM to keep track of per person, right? As a player, being able to communicate what's going on internally for your character, what you are striving for, what you're hoping to achieve, I think brings a lot to the table and a lot to the game. And what you want is to help others support the moments you want to build up to and the stories you want to tell. Don't hope that other players will pick up what's unsaid or subtle clues. There's a lot of reasons why folks will miss what we think is obvious. There's a very direct fact that different folks of different backgrounds will have different understandings, right? There's also neurodivergence to think about. So I don't think there's anything as being too obvious in communicating what's going on internally for your character. And if everyone does this, it'll just be easier to have everyone have at least one awesome moment at the table, right? Because we're all supporting each other and helping each other get there. And I'd like to ask Greg, right? Because this is the first time we get to hang out. What is a moment that you communicated clearly for a character that helped other people like come together and give you that awesome moment?
I think so much of it happens for me personally in Stars and Wishes.
Right.
And that's obviously out of character. Also, during play, it's usually, and this is another reason you should take breaks, every once when you come back from break, it's always a good time to just be, hey, we just had that scene. I know we're going in this direction now. I, for my character, really do want to see this. Hey, maybe we implied from that last scene that we were going to go another direction. I don't necessarily have a concrete instance that happened, but that's my instinct is after a break there's already a break in play, come back in. If that last scene, you felt like it was going one direction, but you really want to steer it back because you were getting your second cup of coffee. Yeah, that's when a good time to communicate out of character about a particular scene you want to see happen.
Yeah, that's a good argument for breaks too, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm so addicted to taking breaks at the top of the hour. I feel like it helps play. I feel like it really helps the game.
One of the things that I really like, especially when we've gone a few sessions in and maybe we've gotten past the midpoint, is at the start of session saying, I'd really like to have a scene today with this person. Either doing the stars and wishes at the end of session or being willing to do that. Sometimes as a game facilitator, especially when we've only got like 2 or 3 sessions left, I'll say, hey, are there any scenes you really want to have? Our time is limited now, so tell me and I will give you those scenes. If I'm a fellow player and a player asks to get a particular scene, I'm going to 100% try to maneuver that for them.
One of the things that I enjoy when a player does say what they want to do, that gives me the chance to reposition so that I can tie my story into that reaction to that situation and have a deeper, richer reaction to it for my character. So it's valuable not just for yourself, but for the whole table to reorient to. And weirdly, Greg, there was one time, the Neon City Overdrive game, where you said, oh, I'm going for a bot on the end of the game with your character.
Yes.
And I was so glad that you said you were doing that, because I was horrified that it happened for you, and I wanted everything to turn out good for your character. Because you told me, I wasn't like, oh no.
Well, that character was slowly going downhill, and she was going to end up doomed anyways. I didn't have a good idea for what a happy epilogue for her was. So I was like, yeah, we're going for it. That's a good point, because this happens a lot in PBTA games. People will say, I'm more interested in the fail here.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We don't always get that choice in the game, but that's an out of character thing that you can say, like, I'm more interested in the fail here. And that telegraphs to your fellow players that, like, you're interested in that arc. It also tells the facilitator that, this is a moment where if there's a hard move to make or even a soft move to make, just go for it. Just take it. That's an out of character thing you can say. It's just like, we're going for this, and I'm really excited if I mess this up.
Yeah. And a question I like to ask myself out loud so that people understand my thought process is, how much do I want this character to suffer? Like, how much do I want Takahiro to go through before they find love with the right person, right?
Will H is really good about saying, hurt my character, hurt my NPCs,
Yeah.
like being very explicit about it. But you mentioned Takahiro. One of the things that character and a number of others have really shown me is, if you have headcanon about your character, say it. Get it to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Express it, because if you don't, no one has heard it. It is dead.
Right.
Get it out there. If you've got something that's telling us something about why your character is acting a particular way, what their experience is, the other players want to know it. We want to be able to play off of it. If we don't know it, we can't do anything with it. The game facilitator can't do anything with it. And it just kind of sits there. And at the end, you're like, oh, I had this cool idea.
I had this 10-page backstory.
Years of 10-page
There's a difference.
One of the things that I struggle with as a player, like if I'm not granted that power of the game manager, the GM, the ref, the whatever, where, I can just like make things go. If I'm a player, I understand this is not the correct thought process. But as a player, I will often sublimate any, like, other people are talking. I'll just let them go. And so this communicating clearly and out of character, if I'm not very defined in the spotlight, can be hard for me. But we're playing on Zoom or StreamYard or Google Meet, and chat is this wonderful channel for me to be able to have that medium or that mode of communication so that I can say, this is good, or I really like that, communicating the things that I'm enjoying, throwing popcorn at the screen type moments. So that's something this is going to be a recurring theme during this podcast episode. That's something I'm going to miss as one of my local groups goes face to face.
Yeah, the chat, it's so useful.
Mhm.
There's no equivalent in real life. Yeah. Face to face. Why did I say real life? Anyway, face to face. There's no equivalent of chat.
I've had whole scenes happen in chat. In Star Wars Saturday games, I've had game like characters and we're doing this. We're doing this in the thing. And it's just like the side story, almost a fanfic, or the side stories that are not actually on screen, but people know happened, right? That's the director's cut, the deleted scene.
Yeah.
It's just a little thing in chat like, oh, and I said this. Oh, yeah, of course, and blah, blah, blah. We put the button on it in the chat while the rest of the thing happens.
Third in our initiative order today is Greg.
I go after and then before, right?
Right. You're the sort of
Yeah, high-low.
soft, squishy middle, right?
Right.
You're the wizard now?
Well, I'm going to give more love to Will H. This comes straight from his playbook. You should take notes as a player. You should take notes. You should have a pad of paper. You should scribble all over it. On the Gauntlet, we play a lot online, of course. And I'm a big fan of an NPC gets introduced. And in 3 scenes, we will have all forgotten that name. The facilitator might have forgotten that name. I will have forgotten that name. So I add it to the NPC tab. Somebody mentions that their move has this weird little side thing, but they're in the scene. They're doing that, but they had to make a choice. I'll put a little tick mark next to that choice on the character keeper. There's a lot of burden of play. There's a lot of paperwork that happens all the time, and it shouldn't, not that it can't be, it shouldn't be only the facilitator's job to do that. Oh, and here's the big one. As a player, you ultimately have more control over the narrative. So you should write down your fellow players' stars and wishes, because you can make those happen.
Ooh.
The facilitator can try, but
I love
you,
that.
as a player, can make that happen.
Absolutely.
Very good.
No, that hadn't occurred to me.
Yeah, that's so good, Greg.
The one thing about online games is if you're playing a game that has tokens moving around, it is almost impossible to take care of the tokens when you're doing the scene. I found that in Refuge and the belonging games.
Yeah.
Where I just had to throw my hands up and go, can someone else do this while I'm babbling away? And then I'll try to help for other people. Because it would just be so many places where they're coming from and going to. And there's a lot of times when having someone else kind of do that little bit of just making the notes, moving the pieces, marking the XP as you go. It makes a big difference so that you're not worrying and scrambling around between pieces. Particularly online, it makes a difference.
I do try to avoid adjusting people's stats or adding XP or something, only for the fact that I do it if I don't have a good, clear time and play that I can communicate that I've done that for them. Then they might go in and, they have a -1 of their stat and then they -1 their stat again. And then it's like, whoa. Why? I thought this wasn't right. So I do avoid doing that. But writing little notes or making little marks on the character sheet. The character keeper is a wide canvas. Add pictures. Mm-hmm. It's a big record of play. And it shouldn't only be the facilitator's job to add to it.
I will say the structure that Jammi developed for the NPC tab with nice color blocks, with a frame for the image, and then it's name, pronouns, connection, and then a space for notes. And, I'd had similar versions of that, but this one, there's something about it that really works for me. It works visually. The pictures are big enough. The space to put the notes there are big enough. So I really have come to appreciate that, where before, when I had NPC tabs, maybe I'd fill them in between sessions, right? I'd put a name in and I'd figure it out between. But that one actually is clean enough and does what I need it to do.
I play a lot of Star Wars Saturday games. There's a lot of shared ship character sheets. I take it upon myself to constantly be checking that and revising things in the ship sheet just to make sure that it's up to date as we progress. And then Sabine changes the name of the ship, because that's what they do.
Oh, yes. The Dreaming Gun Talk.
Yes.
As a GM, having a Dan Brown or Will in the game is such a crutch that I fall back on. They are such strong support.
Yeah.
And then I have to get used to not not having them. We were playing Nice Black Agents, and Will had to miss a session. I was like, what are we going to do?
I got to play with Dan and Will H recently, like in the last few months, and for someone who I have like brain fritzing issues because of my temporal lobe epilepsy and other things, so having the notes is super, super helpful. It really helps me as a player to like keep track of things, because it's easier for me as a GM to keep track of what's going on because that's mainly your job, but as a player it's way more difficult for me. So I really appreciate having one other player who is dedicated to the craft of lore keeping. It's such a boon.
And the other side effect of it is that it keeps you engaged as a player if you're taking notes. You're not in a scene. I have 3 monitors in front of me. My brain can wander very easily. Wikipedia is open all the time during Star Wars Saturday. I can go down a Wikipedia hole so quickly and lose track of the narrative. And if I'm taking notes, I'm not. Because I'm what are the other characters doing? What is the scene? Where are we going? It just keeps you focused in the game all the time.
For sure.
All right. Next, as we move to the back of the party, usually we put like rogues, I think, and people that can fire ambush, range fire.
Ranged attack.
Sherri.
Yeah, I'm a sneaky person. Sure. So the one thing is that I've slowly learned over my time playing in the Gauntlet is check in. And then when you think that you've checked in enough, maybe check in again. There's a thing with just being willing, and it's related to that sort of meta talk, is while you're playing your character, when you realize that as you're going to make a dramatic turn, it is incredibly helpful for the other players to hear that and for you to go, is this cool? I'm going to do this thing. The implication that it's going to change stuff. So other players have something that's at risk in that situation that gives them a chance to go, or, say, maybe not yet, give me a scene, that sort of thing. A little bit of negotiation in there. It never hurts. But the other thing is that I've started to realize is that it's actually some of the best practice to get used to using safety tools. Because if you're thinking, I'm about to do something that's going to change the situation, I'm going to check in with other people. You become more aware of what other people are thinking and doing and what they're attached to at the table. So you're reading the table better. But the other thing is that you've become a voice that raises a flag, checks in, talks about it, and it's not because something bad has happened or something as alarming has happened, but because something's going to change. So when that time comes and you see something needs a safety tool call out, you can do that, and people don't panic. They don't feel like they're being attacked. They don't feel frightened by the whole thing that you're going to say that they did a bad thing. You're just going, hey, let's check in on that, just like you always do with your stuff. You're asking them to do that. Everyone does a check-in, big thumbs up, everyone moves on. It is the best practice. And the players that I see do this, sometimes they do it explicitly, sometimes they just go, I'm really thinking of killing this guy. And then they look around the table. Sometimes that's all you gotta do, And it's one of those things that I think of as Eli Seitz does that, Josh Hiddey does that. It's that sort of thing of going, before I make a big turn, before I close a door, let everyone have a talk. But then they're super aware of how everyone is at the table anyway. And it gives everyone that voice, models it for them, so that maybe they'll do it before and it lets you go strong. You say, I'm thinking of doing this thing, this irreparable thing. So if you're okay with it, okay, now you can play a far more dramatic scene than you might otherwise if you're going,
exactly, yeah.
Someone's attached to that.
Anytime you're potentially going to impinge on another player's choices, or even like the NPCs that they're strongly attached to, that's important. Just do a quick check-in. Confirm that it is okay with them.
Yes. Check in, especially on people's NPCs that they're attached to. I sort of have two hard every time I will check in when I'm doing this. One is there is a drastic change in tone. Almost every Gauntlet game begins with a tone discussion in Cats. And if there's going to be something that we've just, as play has progressed, we've gotten to a point where there's going to be a dramatic shift in tone, that's a time to check in. Hey, this game is getting gonzo, right? Are we all okay with that? Like, we can do gonzo, but we have to check, is that okay? And then the other one is romance. If there's ever going to be romance, and actually I have a third one. So romance, always check in with player. The Gauntlet does a great thing on the Character Keeper where it's like, are you okay with romance with other PCs? Are you okay with romance with NPCs? Little check boxes next to those. Those are great, but still, double check. And then the third one, it would be in any game, the first time you're going to kill somebody, because some games that happens, check in. Is this what we want? Is this okay? If the narrative is going that way, that's part of the game. We've all agreed that's part of the tone. Checking in. As Sherri talked about, I think I'm going to kill this guy.
Sometimes
right?
really
it's a great moment to check in.
Those confrontational moments between players where there is tension, it's also a great place for the game facilitator and other players to slow things down. There's that frame by frame that comes with script change. And I don't think you necessarily need to call it out for that, but that's a good time to stop and walk it along, A, to give it more weight, and B, to be able to have those opportunities for checking in.
There's a great example of this kind of check-in in the Night Witches episode of Plus One Forward. Jason Morningstar is running the demo of the game, and he's playing a pretty terrible person, and he just checks in. Hey, I just want to let you know, this isn't me. And of course, he's probably doing it for the audience as well, because Jason's a pretty good guy. The stuff he said was pretty terrible. But I liked that so much. I really enjoyed how he modeled that, and I thought that was one of the things where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm so glad that's part of this show, to show people you can do that kind of check-in. It doesn't take but a second.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's it. Especially once you establish that you do that, then everyone knows the cues.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
And it
nothing
becomes
more
easier
than an
and easier
evil
each time.
smile and a, well, maybe.
A subtle add-on to the whole check-in, especially for online, is if you're playing in a game and the game facilitator is working with a player, there's a certain amount of concentration there. Keep an eye on other players' reactions. Keep an eye on the screen. If you see a player make a grimace, or kind of sit back and like the kinds of things that demonstrate that maybe they're not cool with this, you can message them. You can check in with them. I really appreciate when we played Last Fleet, there were several cases where there were moments where I was like, whoa, I'm not entirely cool with this. I'm not entirely cool with what the player's doing. And Jim checked in with me as the game facilitator. You can't catch everything. But if all the players are kind of watching for that and are able to check in and just make sure, hey, is everything cool? Are you good with that? Are you okay? Those are simple little things you can do when it's not your scene. I love watching other people's faces. And I play broad when I play online. I'm making the biggest faces I can to try and get that across. All right. So, batting cleanup.
No, I rolled the worst. I biffed it. I biffed my initiative roll.
I literally chose to have Rich go last to bat cleanup.
I love it.
Both at the end of this first round and at the end of the second round, so we kind of have the timing along. So, Rich, what's your topic?
We've talked a lot about player-to-player interaction, and maybe this is my GM bias, but I have been playing a lot lately and trying this, and it works. Be a good audience for the GM's NPCs as well. Be a good audience for the players' characters. But you can reflect, react, inquire, reinforce the GM's NPCs because they're player too. And there are some great benefits that you get from expressing joy in the accomplishments of an NPC. Like, everyone can get on board for so-and-so the droid. Everyone gets on board for the plucky, try-hard NPC. And it's really fun that you can get that bit of camaraderie despite whatever kind of game it is. It could be a game where there's a lot of PvP, but everybody's got faith in this one particular NPC, and so we're very invested in that side story. And it is a side story. And yes, it might be a strategic ploy for the GM to like you, but the GM's here to have fun too, so that's okay as well. I think it's important to get involved in the world, and when the world only exists as the other PCs, it becomes a little more empty. It goes from being a comic book with all these beautiful backgrounds, with everything going on that exists in a realized space, to the kind of thing where it's like action lines and one person's face, or the TV episode where it's only headshot, 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 headshot. I love the idea of the more broad approach. It's the Babylon 5 versus the like crappy sci-fi show of, wow, there's a dramatic cross, or, oh, we get to see a little business on the side here between these characters. So take an interest in the world, ask questions about it, reinforce it, even take a moment to talk about how it impacts your character's reaction. Because then you're embedding yourself in this thing rather than fighting against it or ignoring it. You're becoming a part of it in a stronger way, and also lifting up the place that is our imagined space.
It is the easiest way to get to know the world faster, to get more invested in it, and in some ways to delineate your character in a way that you can't with the PCs, because the PCs are all spectacular, and they're all doing something very strong, and they're all wondrous, but the world is full of regular folk, and so this is you with the world, and it's another great way to explore that character.
You know, as a GM, you're doing stuff. As a game facilitator, you're on a lot. You're on so much. And sometimes it can be hard to tell where things have landed, especially when you put things out there and players maybe don't pick up on them or aren't interesting, or you get to the end at Stars and Wishes and everybody's talking about how good the other players' scenes were, or things that you liked aren't getting mentioned there. You know, as a GM, I'm going to be a little vain there. But one of the ways you can get positive reinforcement, positive feedback to the GM is interacting with an NPC. It's such a great feeling for the GM when an NPC lands and people are interested in it. So take the time to do that, to find those things out. The GM has put those people there. They're not just objects. The GM has headcanon for all of these people, so let's find out what that is.
And triangle it. Like, grab a PC. Hey, let's go talk to so-and-so. Make sure another player is interacting with that NPC along with you. Then you can get a cool spice of like, oh, well, I like this person. You don't like this person. And how are we going to interact there? What changes about our relationship because of this NPC being there? That's golden stuff and really, really fun. And because you pulled a player along, you don't feel like a spotlight hog and don't make people mad.
And related to that, I also like, as a player, connecting to other people's NPCs. It says, I'm interested in you and your character, but I'm also going to form this other relationship with an NPC that's important to you or that's connected to you. And so in a way, you're still bringing in the other PC and you're still bringing in the other player. I like those little moments. David Morrison and I have this thing going on right now with an NPC between the two of us that's been a lot of fun. I really enjoy that.
That's sort of the brilliance of a game like Hearts of Wulin, where every character, you're driving a wedge. See, I'll get it in there. I'll get that promo in there.
Yeah, Hearts of Wulin, a great game that you can pre-order right now.
You can pre-order. But yeah, because every relationship becomes a wedge that you can push. And the PCs are a great place where you maybe even check in with the GM if you're going to start pushing hard on an NPC. When I read about this one, the little theater theory here, you know that Juliet is beautiful in Romeo and Juliet because of how Romeo reacts to her. You know a king is powerful in theater because all of the other characters on stage bow. In theater, the reaction is all. How we react to a character in the audience is 100% how the characters on stage are reacting. In a role-playing game, reacting to the NPCs as the player characters, it drives home that is the villain. When we all get in the ship and run, when we drive the car as fast as we can away from that NPC, it sells that that's the villain in the story. And that helps build the narrative. It helps bring it in. That reaction to an NPC, it's pushing that NPC's role. And it works for PCs too.
Before I gamed with the Gauntlet, as I GM'd, I literally had NPCs who were tabbed in my mind as, this is my Greek chorus. These NPCs exist to say, oh, here comes Mr. Badass, or, oh my goodness, this is a terrible thing that is happening to everyone. And that's all they did. They just stood off to the side and Statler and Waldorf things. And now I play with the Gauntlet, and I can take that tool out of my toolbox more or less, because players are interacting with things. They're changing, they're evolving, they're reflecting.
There's that article that David Mamet wrote looking at the TV show The Unit years ago, in which he talks about the fact that if you have two people just saying how cool somebody else is, that Greek chorus thing doesn't do anything. It isn't pushing the story forward, but actual interaction with the people and a dynamic approach is good. I'll also, just since we've been dropping names, I love Daryl for how he takes NPCs and maneuvers them and interacts with them and then uses them to loop in other players. Any game that Daryl's in is kind of a masterclass in doing that.
Yeah, Daryl is so great at interacting with NPCs. Like when he took Takahiro's ex-boyfriend into the fold, I felt really special as a player that Daryl was paying attention to an NPC that was important to me. So Daryl is great to play with.
All right, so we go to the next turn, which brings us back up to the initiative. I've been running 13th Age, so this is like old hat for me.
I'm having flashbacks. Anyway, yes.
So for my second topic, and you might think, as a white dude, maybe this is not the appropriate person to be talking about this, but I'm going to, because I'm also the person that gets feedback about play at the Gauntlet, and it's an issue that comes up from time to time. If you're white and or a dude, try to be conscious of your gender and your cultural privilege at the table, especially in terms of interruptions, in terms of assumption of expertise, and spotlight time taken. Here's the thing is, we know from studies that men are terrible at judging how much time has been taken up in conversations, in meetings, by non-male persons in the gathering. That's a constant problem. So we have to be aware of that. It's unfortunately hard-coded. Even when people are told explicitly that this is the case, the effect remains the same. So it's going to happen because gatherings and RPG groups are meetings. And I think we really have to be cognizant about that. When I say expertise, I mean expertise on the level of rules. I mean expertise on the level of, well, this is how we play. Expertise on the level of safety tools. Expertise on the level of cultural experience. Now, a caveat for this is this. If this is your cultural experience, then that's an expertise we're going to want at the table. If we're playing Hearts of Wulin and you come from a Chinese cultural background and you have some insight on that, that's expertise that can be shared. We don't want to discount that, especially if that expertise calls into question things that are happening at the table. We have to listen to those things. We have to take those in. But if we're playing a game in a particular genre, there is certainly a place, a loving place for all the trivia, and that's what makes up Star Wars. It's what makes up a lot of the wuxia things. But no decap it. Bring it in. It'll be fun. And also in a way that doesn't alienate people. You know, there are a lot more things about the cultural effect at the table about things that are happening, being conscious of other people's cultures, about where they're living, about where they're at. Just have to be sensitive about that. Lines and veils and the X card go only so far. They are a layered set of safety tools, but sometimes there are sort of soft issues that are harder to mark out. Well, we have to be cognizant about those. And I think if you have the privilege, then be aware of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So outside of the gauntlet, I'm very used to the fact as a femme-perceived person who exists in geek spaces, I have to be tested more often to know if I can exist and coexist in the space with others. So I remember when I was running Girl by Moonlight for the first time on the gauntlet, and a player, Jesse, asked a question, and he was like, so this is a general question I have for Forge in the Dark. It's not just Girl by Moonlight, but what is so-and-so? And I remember stealing myself, bringing in all of that knowledge, because of course beforehand I had to study hard to make sure if a question like this came up, I could answer it. I'm not allowed to just coast by in these situations. And so I prepared myself, I answered the question, and I was already ready for the follow-up question and the follow-up question after that to really test. But instead, Jesse just said, yeah, that makes sense. Thanks so much for answering that. And then just left it. And I was like, what? My answer was accepted as it was. And so I didn't realize until that moment how used to I was, how I just take for granted that I have to push myself and defend everything that I do know in terms of my expertise. So I do notice that there's been a significant shift in the space, and I'm really glad that the gauntlet is cognizant of it. I know that we still have a ways to go, but I do think we're definitely headed there. And the more that it happens, the easier it is to welcome other people into the hobby, which is really what I'd love to see.
I think that the request that I'm making to players is, if you're a male and you have non-male players at the table, have that in your mind, that there's a certain amount of pressure that is on them, a certain amount of fear they may have based on past experience. If you're white and we have POC players at the table or characters from other marginalized groups, have in your mind that they may have come from an experience that has had a lot of pressures and things like that. Let's do what we can to welcome them in.
I can't discount the extent of pre-discouragement that you carry into games if you come in as a femme or an outsider at all. You are used to people talking over you, dismissing you, thinking that you couldn't possibly solve a problem, thinking that if you do assert yourself that you're pushy and terrible. And it's one of those things that no matter how decent most of the players are that you always have, not just in gaming, but in life, you are always dealing with that. And so when you hit that in a game, you're going to tell, because the non-males are going to lean back and detach, because
it's just
there's
easier.
no winning. It's easier, and it's the only way to not cause a terrible, horrible situation.
Mm-hmm.
And guys, I say this to guys, if you're hearing this and you're thinking, well, we had a woman at the table and they never said anything and it was fine, I guarantee you that there was a problem. I'm going to say that.
Yeah, 100%.
Maybe not a big one,
but
maybe a little one. But your lack of awareness of the friction does not indicate that there was not a problem.
I'm so happy that 99% of my gaming experience is on the gauntlet. I'm so fortunate. I'm an expert in so very few things, and none of them really apply to role-playing games. It's just something you have to come to the table aware of, and you can always be better at it.
I'll say one last thing before I throw to Jammi on this. Expertise also means rules expertise. One thing I love about Patrick knows the rules when we play with him and watches them and so on, but he waits for a pause. Mm-hmm. He waits for the break. He waits for between games to go, hey, you handled it this way. I think it might actually work this way. Because sometimes as a GM, I'm making that choice consciously, and if you to kind of keep the flow, If you have to correct rules, if it isn't vital, sit on it. Wait for a break.
I've done that for games where it's what is the rule that we've all agreed we're going to elide, and what is the rule that just got misinterpreted in the moment. Yeah, a break is another break. Selling breaks. But a break is a great time. I will usually read the rules before I play a game. Sometimes it's just I misread the rule, and I'll just bring it up like, I thought it went this way. Oh, no, it does go that way. Never mind. But after a break is a great time to check on a rule. Is that what we wanted to do? Oh, we're gonna ignore that whole part of the game because we played it before and it doesn't work. Great.
And on the flip side, sometimes they did get the rule wrong. So, but it's a more gracious and less pressured time to do it. So
yeah, right.
Jammi, what is your second topic?
I think the more important question is, am I the cleric in this situation, in this
I think
initiative
so.
order? Because I'm second. I was just thinking about it. Shout out to all my fellow clerics. The second thing that I wanted to look at is giving your GM and other folks at the table fun daggers. So daggers is like a term that's used in some of my groups, or I've seen it online, where it's taken on a very specific meaning. We joke that daggers are plot elements or ideas or complications that we want to come, that can come up later to make the game really exciting. And it's something that you as a player consciously gives to the GM or gives to other players. I think a really good example is, you know what, I'm going to not agree to go along with this NPC right now and take what I want, but I know that this is going to come bite me in the butt later. So I'm going to give you this dagger right now. There's a GM I know who likes to joke that they have an entire rack of daggers that they can just pull from at any point. And I think that's super exciting because with that mindset, it's to really make your characters vulnerable, to really emotionally connect to the PCs and other NPCs, to be emotionally invested and make decisions that may make sense to the heart of your character, but are not necessarily optimal or tactical, because we are not playing characters that are machines that always do the most optimal tactic at all times, right? We're playing very flawed, very real characters. And I like how a lot of belonging outside belonging games remind you of that. There's always a tip to play your character in a way that makes them vulnerable. And I really, really enjoy doing that. So it's one of my favorite things, just like giving daggers left and right. Like, especially when like in a game with Lowell GMing, I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna like throw out all these daggers and Lowell will take them out at the perfect time and it hurt me so good. I can't wait. So I really like it because it's an agreement of trust, right? I trust you that you're gonna make this story super awesome and I don't have to quotation mark, protect my character at all times.
I think that dovetails beautifully with your first one too, which is the out of character, right? You said it has to be something you explicitly say. This is something I'm interested in. This is where my character has a pain point and I'm interested in exploring any of the other characters poking it. Yeah, that's great. There's games that are more explicit about that than others, but you can take that to any game.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I remember after playing a lot of bite marks, it became even easier to be more vulnerable because that game is like, it's built in. Like when you spell and you have to be vulnerable, but it's great to bring it into other games too.
I played a game of Masks and we had a legacy player. And the legacy is all about the challenges and trauma of the past for your character and your character's mentor and the one you look up to. And every time that player was sort of confronted, well, is this what's going on? They're like, oh, no, we were all happy. we were all fine. And it became, it's like, you've chosen the legacy. There's lots of great stuff here. Give me a knife.
Yeah.
A happy home life is maybe not what this is intended. And it was such a weird experience, especially where I had other players in the game who were like, oh, yeah, here's how my life is going to get terrible. Because it's Masks and they're all built into the character sheet.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? When you give daggers, it helps the GM know what to structure around or what to invite to like really engage with you and your character in a story. Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, this sounds like the improv concept of giving gifts.
Mm-hmm.
You want to give other characters gifts. You want to give the facilitator a gift. Hey, this is a fun thing about my character that might be interesting for us all to explore.
Yeah.
All right, we are back at the soft, squishy middle
Squishy Wizard.
of our marching order. Greg, what is your second topic?
In games with relationship mapping, you should, of course, and most games encourage this, tie your other player characters into your relationship map. But you should also take note, because often the math just doesn't work out, that you have a relationship bond with every other player at the table. You should take stock about who you don't have a relationship with, who you don't have a bond question with, very early on. And in that mystery, you should push for that at the beginning of play. You should try and figure out what that relationship is. This comes from playing a lot of Hearts of Wulin and recently playing Apocalypse Keys. Both great games that have this relationship mapping, but usually the math doesn't quite work out, that you have a bond question with every other player at the table. And so it's great to push at those, because those, you've kind of built up this mechanism at the beginning of play, but there's all these little mysteries about, okay, how does my character relate to this other player's character? Because we haven't defined that yet. And that's a great place to push in that undefined space to create an interesting scene. Maybe you've just met that other player character. Maybe their player character is meeting for the first time, and we get to see that in the context of this greater thing that we've built.
There's that great dynamic of, well, you're my friend, but then this guy's also your friend. So, what is our relationship? Because that gets really complicated. The friend of a friend thing is a weird figuring out. What have you heard about them? How do you relate? Do they like you better than they like me?
Oh my gosh, I was thinking that. I was
Just
thinking a great
real
dagger
life.
is to
Terrible.
say I worry about that, right?
I was first.
Yeah, especially if there were secrets. Has this person told you my secrets? How much do you know about this?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I think with relationship mapping, trying to involve the other players in different ways is super essential in creating, why are you all here together? Why are you telling a story together? Which is something I've really come to enjoy with story games and PBTA, because when I go back to games where there are no connections, it feels so difficult, right? Why do we care about each other, and why are we here? Is it just because we met in the tavern and the ale is kind of good? I guess, maybe, kind of. But yeah, doing that extra step that you talked about, Greg, really makes a huge difference, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Relationship maps and relationships are dynamic. They're not static.
Mm-hmm.
You should be willing to rewrite them or change them, and they should be able to evolve.
Yeah.
The iconic relationship doesn't make any sense. They simply aren't, typically.
What's the iconic relationship?
Iconic relationship is, I love him, and that will never change. I will never have a moment of uncertainty. It's that sort of, that's a dagger you could give someone, but...
Yeah, I was about to say, that's a very good dagger.
That's a kind of dynamic thing, too. But for the most part, people's relationships to each other, even if they remain friends, things will change. And you will have insecurities and uncertainties and times of trials. Those are fun.
Every character that I've loved playing with or running for has changed over the course of the game. Characters that don't change over the course of a campaign, that's not that interesting to me. Mm-hmm. As a fellow player, as a game facilitator.
Yeah,
I'm constantly taking notes. But obviously, I'm making little notes about how, if we had an establishing question that built this relationship, how has our narrative so far adjusted that? And a lot of games, there are mechanical times where it's like, hey, it's time to rewrite this relationship, but you should just do that anytime you feel like. You can ignore any rule that mechanizes it. You have my permission. But yeah, you should just, you should always be updating that. You should always be thinking about, hey, we said at the beginning that we're friends, but I don't think that's true anymore. Mm-hmm. After what just happened and the adventure that we just went on, I don't trust you anymore. And we should write that down so we have a note to explore it next session, right?
So good.
Yeah, that's one thing about Powered by the Apocalypse games with that established HX history step is that I've seen in miniseries, like we often play on the Gauntlet, that can become an iconic statement that doesn't evolve, doesn't change, isn't reflected upon, rewritten. That's a thing that I would like to change about future games as we talk about this, is having that moment of, hey, have these relationships changed? Whether I'm a player or the GM, I'd like to have that open conversation just so we can reflect. I think that's really cool.
I think it leads to richer play because you are acknowledging all of the things that have happened. So when your world absorbs the things that have happened and changes with them, then the game is just, it's about the players. And that's what you want.
Sherri, what is your second topic?
All right, so I'm going to start this with a statement, a very simple statement, but in my job, I'm sort of a person that, I don't know how to describe it. I'm not a project manager per se. I'm a solution manager. I come in, people give me what they need, they give me what they have, and I start producing solutions. And I like things tidy. So when I get to a game, I tend to go, oh, I like these things because they fit together. And I can add a little square box and all the space is used up nicely and there's no inefficiency. And for a long time, that would be how I would approach everything. I was not a person for non-ideal choices and those sorts of things. But lately I have come to adore letting dice and randomness decide my character, and particularly pick lists full of crazy things that I'm not even sure what they mean when I choose them. It has become the life of my games lately is to go, okay, I've just seen this thing. It would have never occurred to me. I'm going to choose a life of loss. Everything I do, it falls apart. Then the next thing I choose is that I'm a nightmare warrior. All right. Now what does all this mean? And now all of a sudden it's a character that I would have never put together in a nice tidy box. There is no box for that. So there are games that have, essentially you roll some dice, you get some random qualities, you have some pick lists, choose something outside your comfort zone, see what you end up with. I mean, yes, try to make sense of it. Mm-hmm. In that moment when you're starting, at least enough to get through the first introductions, right? And then let the game define what those things mean for you. And you will come out with a game that has revealed something about yourself and something about that character to you. It's just super fun and exciting. It's very different for me, but I'm a little bit controlling. And I like things to be tidy. So you might not be that way. You might have always been a genius this way.
People get surprised with how quickly I can make a character. And it's because I'm really just choosing intuitively. Like I go, that seems cool. I don't know how that's going to work. Let's see what happens when we play. And then, this feels really great. Don't know how that's going to work. That's fun. And so I can put together a character really quickly. And I think that leads into me saying trust your intuition. Don't worry too much about planning everything, because for a tabletop game, it's impossible to plan. There's so many other people. There's so many things going on. Really the best thing you can do is be intuitive in the moment, signal to other people what you're interested in, what you're excited about, and just to trust the flow of the game. And I've always had the most fun that way, for sure, rather than if I brought in a really strong character idea weeks before I met anybody else, right? That has never really translated well for me as a player. And yeah, I definitely like the idea of just letting randomness take care of things. Let fate decide.
Fate and pick lists.
For a game that we started a few months ago that I still love, Star Trek Adventures has a kind of a limited life path thing. It's not that deep. It's not like Cyberpunk 2020 or another game, but it's just enough to change up what you were thinking about your character and to reframe it in really interesting ways. I would love more PBTA games that did kind of life path things. I think that could be really interesting. I'm always surprised when we don't see that more in sci-fi games, that want to take the mantle of traveler. Okay, give us a fun life path where it's fun to generate those characters and come up with interesting stories for them.
My buddy Jen is famous with our play group on Sundays that she will Oh, that's an interesting question. Hold on. Grabs her coin, flips it. Turns out that I do like blue. And it's just delightful because, number one, her capricious approach to things that aren't core conceits to the character allow her to evolve. And she also very open, like, no, I don't like that answer. I'll go with the other one. That's okay too. Just because you committed that I'm going to roll the dice. If you roll the dice, you're like, oh, it's terrible. If it's not coded in the rules and everyone's expecting you have to go with it, then you could go with the other choice. The dice helped you to decide by going, well, I thought I didn't care, but it turns out I do care about this thing. And this other option is more appealing to me when I look at the face of this thing of liking blue. I hate blue.
It's really interesting if you play with the randomness and character generation. It starts to feel like the character's introducing themselves to you. Mm-hmm. That if you roll a couple dice and then, okay, this particular choice I'll just make. This one kind of logically follows. And then you roll another one or two. And it speeds along that character generation process, gets you into play faster. And then it's almost like the character has walked up to you on the street and shook your hand and said, hey, one of my favorite Star Wars Saturday characters who I have retired because I don't want to play him anymore. I rolled his species randomly on one of the species tables in the Star Wars Saturday Character Keeper. And I just went down a Wikipedia hole and I started making choices along the way. And it was just a complete fluke that I ended up with that character. Yeah, Karwu was the result of just a random roll and just making choices that kind of naturally followed from that. And it's just one of my favorite characters, and it was just a random table kind of thing.
And he's an NPC in the game I run for my wife, and it's fun to do an impression of Greg playing Karwu. It's such a delightful character.
Best hairdresser in the galaxy.
Best bald hairdresser in the galaxy, yes. Mm-hmm.
Rich, you are our anchor. Tell us there our batter of cleanups. What is your second topic?
For anyone who's listening to this episode who's like, why does he keep using these baseball terms? I love baseball. That's it. And Lowell's being very gracious. Remember the theme I mentioned earlier about how much I'm going to miss some of the powers of online play? This is another one. I love the ability to look across as a player, look across all of the other players to see what their moves or feats or skills or whatever it is that they're good at. What do they key into? What mechanically is engaging about their characters? Because as a player, I can nudge a scene towards that cool power. I could I need help with this thing. If only we had someone who was good at sneaking around. It's hammy sometimes, especially when I do it, but seeing the wait, that's a thing I do reaction from other players is so fun.
So good. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's great. It's engaging. It's fun because you play these games on the Gauntlet for 3 to 5 sessions most often. You pick the cool bits, and then if you've got 4 or 5 players, you may never get to do the 3rd or 4th cool thing that you had on the Character Keeper. But I, as a player, can oh man, that is super neat looking. Oh, that kind of fires off of this thing. Let me lean that way. Let me go there and drag them along with me. And it is so appreciated. And if it isn't, then just go for a different person's move. It's no big deal. I'm not doing it to get the kudos. I'm doing it because I'm like, I want to see this thing in play. But I also do like it when they get happy too.
The game, I think, for me, where that is the most important and where I've seen Tyler knock it out of the park is Worldwide Wrestling. Because it is so interactive and so negotiating about what you can do and what you want to set each other up for. And Tyler's great at looking at what other people have as their abilities to go, okay, we go and we're going to go do this match. We can do this and you can trigger off this. And it's so good.
Yeah. And I love being the player that's going through, I remember the first time it happened for me was in Roll20. I was going through other people's character sheets and I was like, oh, hey, Maestro, you have this ability that you could do, so you don't have to put up with what this NPC is telling you to do. And the player is like, what? I forgot I got that move. It's such a delicious feeling, right? Like, yeah, go for it. You go, you rock.
When the panini hit and one of my little more traditional local groups said, hey, let's game online. And we were playing a game that didn't have a character keeper. And we hit the point where someone said, okay, what's your perception? Okay, what's your perception? All right, who's got the best perception?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, you go look at the thing. I was just like, oh my God, this is the worst. This is literally the worst. This is the worst gaming moment of 2020 for me.
I hope that was true.
I know, right? I set the bar low.
I think so many of these choices, we've talked about the daggers, the gifts, all the other stuff. That's what every choice you make on your character sheet is. If you've chosen to be max cool, you want to be a cool character. And the easiest way for me to make you feel like you made a cool character is to react to you like you're such a cool character. Mm-hmm. All of that, character sheets are a form of communication. Mm-hmm. They're communication about what you want to see in play. And having them all together, as opposed to you looking at your own communication to yourself about what you want to do, having them all together in a character keeper, it allows other players to be like, oh, so you're a fighter, but you've taken all of these choices about working things out before you fight, working things out with words. You've min-maxed your character away from what the playbook is trying to do. All of those things are just another way that you can engage with that other player and say, oh, we should have a scene where we get together over here and really hit those keys that you've been trying to hit.
Yeah, oh my gosh. And there's no equivalent for face-to-face play, right? Because you would look so rude just picking up people's playbooks and like reading them, giving them back. I can't imagine how it
if you're face-to-face, just, hey, well, we're not in this scene. Can we just swap character sheets real quick?
Because you're not playing that character, so I'll just take a look.
Photocopy everyone's character sheets.
On the flip side, too, it also allows you to not step into other people's niches. Like, you know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, well, they've got these things. I don't want to then take these abilities that duplicate that or step on them or anything like that. And it can't underestimate that.
Right.
It's a big thing.
Oh, yeah.
I will almost always pick a move from another playbook, and I look at all the playbooks that aren't in play.
Yeah.
Everyone that's, I'm not going to try and take your angel move. You're the angel. I want something from the gunlugger. We don't have a gunlugger. Help us, please. We don't have a gunlugger.
This feels like from real experience.
Listeners, that is our main segment of the 200th episode of the Gauntlet Podcast.
200th.
But so many. And now, the segment that everyone loves. I get to ask and have us tell about something that is entertaining us or bringing us joy. So, Jammi, what is giving you life?
I'm so glad you asked, Lowell. What's giving me life is a picture you posted on the Gauntlet flag. I meant it. I love that picture so much. I look at it at least once a day. So it's a picture from Lowell in college. Lowell with long hair and just having a good time at the gaming table with GURPS at the table. I just love that picture so much. I've been having a few bad brain days lately, but I just look at that picture and I look at you smiling, Lowell, and it just, I don't know, it just brings me so much joy. Like, I just love it so much.
Well, I'm glad I shared it then.
I just appreciate how much gaming is such an important part of our lives. Like, I don't have pictures of when I first played D&D or things like that. So I get to just have that bit of resonance with you. I really enjoy it.
Listeners, we will not be linking to that picture.
It's a really good picture, though. Just imagine.
He's a cutie, no doubt.
Greg, what is giving you life?
So recently I've gotten myself into indie and small press wargaming. So there's I've likened this to when you have dinner that's soup and you've eaten and you're very full, and then you still want something that's crunchy, so you go and you grab a bag of potato chips. I've been craving just a little bit of crunch, just a little bit of really rules crunch wargaming. So there's a whole bunch out there. Osprey Games has A Billion Suns and Gaslands. And then recently I got turned on to Turnip 28, which is a Napoleonic miniatures, but it's a dark Napoleonic turnip-based apocalypse where Napoleon died and the world is covered in mossy roots, and they're all just like wearing their armor because it's really easy to paint if no one has faces. And they're trudging around in the mud, and everyone's guns don't shoot very well. And you give orders to units, but sometimes they don't do it. So it's just this adorable little world. And it's also, I don't know if you remember, like 5 years ago, we were all going to get 3D printers and no one was ever going to buy a spatula again. That never happened. But in indie wargaming, it has happened. And you can go and you can print your own little miniature fighters of any description you want. So that's super exciting.
Wow.
Awesome. Sherri, what is giving you life?
So what is giving me life is it's summer. And what summer means is that Lowell goes, you know what we need is some fresh salsa. And then he gets out Rick Bayless's book, Salsas That Cook, and he makes all the delicious salsas in there. And then we have salsa on eggs, and we have salsa on tacos, and we have salsa on just everything that can handle salsa. And it is a beautiful and delightful era. It will happen through the summer, and then fall will come, and he will go, well, it's a lot of work. I don't know. So I have 3 beautiful months ahead of me, full of all the salsas.
I'm so jealous.
You should be. They're amazing. He made a cascabel salsa today. Smoky, sweet, rich tomato flavor. Oh, just so lovely.
Rich, what is giving you life?
Late 2020, when Xbox was releasing the Series X and PlayStation was releasing the PS5, I sat down with my had just turned 15-year-old son, said, which one do you want? We're going Xbox, right? Because you've got all your friends on there. Yes, Xbox. Got him an Xbox a few days after Christmas it arrived. The turn of the year, he said, Dad, I kind of want to play that Persona 5.
Oh, no.
And I said, okay, cool. Went on, created a PlayStation account, and I just looked up. January 4th, I purchased a few games for the PlayStation with my brand new PlayStation account, not having a PS5, because I figure I'll just get it at some point. Then over the last 5 months, I have every day checked 6 different websites to see if they might have one. My son followed a number of people at like Twitter and other areas, and he would, because he's still distance learning, he would run into my office. Dad, go check Amazon right now. They're supposed to get a new stock. No luck. Dad, they're supposed to be doing it in Target. Okay, Sony has a new stock. Yeah, I'd go and I'd wait in the queue for literally like 20 minutes and then be told there's nothing. This past Wednesday, he came in, hey, Amazon's supposed to get a new stock. I go, and it's there. And I click it, and it goes in my cart. And I'm like, wow, check out. I transact. It arrived.
Oh my gosh.
It arrived so Friday. And my son began playing Persona 5 Royal yesterday.
So good.
It's a great game.
He fell asleep at some point and then came upstairs. He's been playing it all day today. He's still in the tutorial.
Yeah, it's that kind of game.
He actually took out the first castle, I think, earlier today when we took the dog for a walk. But yeah, it's been giving me life as I just come downstairs and he's just glued to the television playing Persona 5 Royal. And
I'm so happy for you. I was so worried. I was like, this is a giving me life segment, so it should be good. It should have a good end.
He'll get there. He's just slow. He's slow.
I was just so worried. I'm so happy for you. Yay.
What is giving me life? is that I found out a couple of days ago that the origin story for Cruella de Vil starts out with her mother being murdered by Dalmatians. That is the best, worst thing I've ever heard. And then I watched a little clip of it today, and it is just how did this get greenlit? I love it. It looks terrible. It looks so bad, and it's wondrous. So that is what's giving me life.
Yeah. And it's giving everyone permission, like, you can have a good idea, because it'll be better than people getting killed by Dalmatians. Go out there and create things. You got this.
Yes. Listeners, that's our show. The Gauntlet Podcast is a production of The Gauntlet. We have an online gaming calendar, the Gauntlet Gaming Calendar, where folks can sign up for our sessions. If you've enjoyed this show, consider supporting our Patreon at patreon.com/gauntlet. That supports everything we do, including our network of podcasts and our magazine codex. End of June will be our Gauntlet Community Open Gaming event, June 24th through 27th. You can go to our Gauntlet website to find out more about that. If this time has passed and you're listening to this later, we're doing those a couple of times a year right now. You can find out more about all of that at gauntlet-rpg.com. You can also reach us on Twitter at GauntletRPG or on Facebook at gauntlet.rpggroup. Please consider rating and reviewing our show. It actually does help us out, and that's pretty cool. Greg, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Rich, for coming on the show. And thank you for all the editing.
Oh, thank you.
I know this is going to be a big episode for you to do, and you've always come through, and everything sounds so good.
Thank you.
Jammi, thank you so much for joining as a host on The Gauntlet. It's been great, and your voice is just wondrous to have on with us.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you again, Lowell, for that wonderful picture that I wish people could see. It's so good.
And thank you, Sherri, for all the times you've gone, I don't want to listen to my voice, and been like, I shouldn't be on the podcast, and yet you come back, and we love it.
I'm
so
looking
thank
for
you so
someone
much.
to take over. Just call me.
Thank you, listeners, so much. That is our show.
Can you hear the footsteps in the shadows? Can you smell the metal tang of blood on the air? Can you feel the veil between worlds slipping away with each heartbeat? The Between is here. The Between is a tabletop role-playing game about a group of mysterious monster hunters in Victorian-era London. These hunters learn about monsters and killers throughout the city and conduct investigations in order to neutralize them. Over time, they become aware of the plans of a criminal mastermind who is pulling the strings behind the scenes. They will eventually be forced to confront this mastermind in order to save Queen and Country. The Between is directly inspired by the TV show Penny Dreadful, but also takes inspiration from British horror classics, the works of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, pulp-era media, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and from Hell. It's powered by the Apocalypse and uses the mystery system from our hit game Brindlewood Bay. The Between comes with a 129-page rulebook, 7 playbooks, 10 scenarios or threats, a mastermind campaign sheet, reference sheets, and a supplement called London at Night, The Unseen. The Between PDF is available now on the Gauntlet Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/gauntlet. The Between will be available on DriveThru RPG starting June 14th.